All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us again. I'm Carol Stringer, the A&R agent over in Fulton County. And let's see here. So thank you for joining us again. This is the second webinar in our four-part series. Tonight's topic will be poultry breeds and selection. And our speaker will be Dr. Casey Ritz. He's professor and extension specialist for the Department of Poultry Science. So as I mentioned before, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of the talk. And without further ado, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Carol, and welcome everyone. I was asking Carol earlier, we weren't sure how many people had carried over from the first webinar to this one and through the other two in the series, but we welcome all of you and hope that you get some information today about some chickens. And again, if you have any questions, use the chat box. Carol will be there to kind of monitor that, and we can, if it's pressing, we certainly can do it in the middle. Otherwise, we can wait till the end and ask them some questions. But you can't talk about breeds of chickens without getting a little bit of a history lesson. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson as we go through it. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing where the chicken came from, and you know, what kind of linkages there are with the past. You know, if we have our little Chickenosaurus down there, and which is actually this fossil of one of the most earliest known bird type of dinosaurs, you can see how closely it looks to the modern day chicken skeleton. So there are many that would have us believe that, you know, this is probably the furthest back ancestor of the modern chicken, the Archaeopteryx. But also it's interesting too, some recent work has been done within the last 10 years, trying to identify chicken and their relationship or connectivity with dinosaurs actually. And what they found is that really the T-Rex's closest really living relative is probably the lowly chicken. Now, I'm just waiting for them to find the skeleton that looks like this, and I think that would be you know, that's the missing link we're looking for. But whether or not it happens, we'll see. But the history of poultry. Let's talk about the history of poultry for just a second, so that you understand kind of where some of our different breeds and types of chickens come from. Chickens essentially were, you know, according to the historical records, human historical records, we have domestication of the chickens occurred somewhere between 8 and maybe 9,000 years ago. So the chicken, not as we know of, but the chicken has been around for a long time. In association with human habitation. Now, the red jungle fowl is really the primary ancestor that we do have of the modern chicken. And as you can see, it looks a lot like a chicken. These are found actually alive and well in Southeast Asia, India. And the ancestry, though, of our modern chicken leads us straight to the jungle fowl that are found in those areas. So about, it's in the record, it's been found that about 5,000 years ago, people in China began keeping chickens. And, you know, in India, we know that they were domesticated by 3000 BC. So way, way back, we know that chickens were being kept. Chickens didn't reach Europe until somewhere between 1000 and 500 BC, which is interesting. You know, when Rome, you know, went kind of swept across the world, the Roman Empire, they found chickens already in Europe, parts of Europe where they were in many of their conquests. The Greek historian Aristotle wrote 400 BC, he wrote the Egyptians, he were incubating eggs artificially from dung heaps. And some of those very practices that were done millennia ago are still being done even today in some of the old hatcheries that can be found even in Egypt. And some of these pictures down here are showing you that these are chicken eggs that are being incubated in a clay incubator, essentially, that's large enough for a human to get into. This man is skilled enough; he can tell the temperature of the egg by holding the egg to his eyelid, and then he can also candle the egg with some of the light that's allowed to come through in parts of that incubator. Very, very interesting. And the Roman conquest that began, essentially 500 BC, all the way through the fall of Constantinople in 1453, there was a big contributor to the worldwide expansion of chickens as we know it. Ancient Egypt, they had their own poultry production and processing, and those birds that were, again, they're millennia ago, those same breeds of birds are still alive and well today. The Egyptian goose and the Egyptian Fayumi chicken breed, all are still alive and well throughout history. The chicken really for 1,000 years or more really wasn't consumed per se. They were more for fighting birds, and the fighting bird history goes back as far as human history really does go. And the Greeks and the Romans, they idolized the chicken, the rooster, and for its fighting spirit that it had. And so many of the conquests of both the Greeks and the Romans had chickens associated with them. The Romans considered them to be sacred birds, really, and they were used as oracles for divination. An example would be if they wanted to know whether or not to go to war or not, or to wage a particular battle, they would consult the sacred chickens who were in the pen, and for a period of time they would feed and water would be withheld from them, and then they would be offered feed and water. And if they went right to the feed and scattered it and ate, it was considered a good omen, and they would proceed with their war plans. If the birds didn't eat or drink, then it was considered a bad omen. Maybe they should rethink their war strategy. There's an interesting story. It's during the first Punic War, Rome versus Carthage, and the tradition is, of course, that for a military endeavor, they're going to observe the actions of these sacred chickens. And one particular battle, Roman commander, his name was Poultry. They offered the chickens food, and they didn't eat. And he was incensed. He thought he had enough advantage for the battle. So he just threw the chickens overboard. And according to the record, he exclaimed that if they were not hungry, perhaps they were thirsty. And the end result, though, was he lost the battle big time. It was the largest, greatest naval victory that Carthage had ever had in war. And as a result, Poultry was recalled to Rome and charged with treason, and was convicted of a lesser charge of sacrilege over that chicken incident. He narrowly escaped death and was sentenced to exile. The take-home story is pay attention to your chickens and keep you out of trouble. Well, we can't talk about the history and breeds without talking about cockfighting just a little bit. The sport of cockfighting has been a huge influence, not only on domestication of the bird, but also distribution of chickens throughout the world. They were carried around everywhere as for sport by all invading armies, essentially of every nation practically. Wherever they went, they took their chickens with them. Romans were no exception. They found the English and Germanic tribes in Europe already had fighting birds, but before the Romans ever appeared. There's a story, another story, fifth century Greek general Themistocles. And, the story goes that he was on his way to try and repel the invading Persian forces, the Memnonite, and he stopped to watch two roosters fighting. And he told his troops, he said, look, behold, these do not fight for their household gods, for the monuments of their ancestors, for glory or liberty, really, or even the safety of their children, only because one will not give way to the other. And the way that story goes is that it inspired his army to repel the Persian forces at that particular time. So throughout history, we see wood carvings and, famous French and Italian painters who can't paint anything but naked people, apparently, but even during a cockfight. But we see throughout history this really this adoration for chickens, and it really cockfighting really has been a big part of that, even in the tradition of American culture and history. And many of our founding fathers promoted, kept, participated in cockfighting, including Washington, Jefferson, Jackson, and even Lincoln. There's a quote that's circulating on the internet that Lincoln said about chickens, and essentially saying, if men can fight, then why can't the chickens? And so, again, it's been a huge part of the history of our birds. Get my I'm on time here. So if we think about the standard chickens that we have and the options that we have in modern day, we essentially have about six poultry types. We have our egg layers, we have our meat birds, we have what we would consider a dual purpose bird. These are chickens that lay a good amount of eggs. They have enough meat on their bones that when it comes time to recycle them, that it's something that can be done. But then we also have other types, the bantam class, which are essentially miniatures of the breeds that we have, been bred for their small stature. We have the ornamental birds, which really aren't good egg layers and typically don't have a lot of meat on their bones. And they tend to be pretty, and really the game birds, the fighting birds, would probably fall in that ornamental class as well. Well, when it comes to the types of chickens that we have, we can group all these breeds into essentially 5 classes of birds. And this is depending on where they come from geographically, where they were developed. So if we look at the history, again, the red jungle fowl, Southeast Asia, China, India, where it kind of was domesticated. From there, we have the Asiatic class of chickens. As human history and as human trade progressed over the centuries, chickens again went into the Mediterranean, Romans, the Greeks, etc., then on into Europe, and then into England, and then over here into the Americas, North America, and in particular. And so those are the 5 classes of chickens that we have. And based on where they come from, they have different expectations of what those different breeds look like. Well, back in 1874, the American Poultry Association essentially was tired of trying to settle the arguments of determining what a true breed is or what consists of a breed. And so they came up with the American Standard of Perfection, which is a description of all the recognized breeds and varieties of domestic poultry, what each one is required to have in order for judges, breeders, and exhibitors to have a fair and equitable breeding program or or exhibition program. And so each breed within in this American Standard Perfection, I think they're on their 45th edition or something like that. There's a brief history, some economic qualities, disqualifications, if there are certain physical characteristics of a bird that don't match that history or that description in American Standard Perfection, then it would be disqualified from being a purebred chicken. And so because of this American Standard Perfection, we know what what a barred rock is supposed to look like, or what a Rhode Island Red is supposed to look like, or what English breeds are supposed to be, or what some of our Continentals or European breeds are supposed to look like, and our Mediterranean and others. And I'll talk about some of these breeds here in just a moment. But because of that standardization that we have now, we can, that helps us to, in many ways, to purify or keep breeds pure, and also to keep those bloodlines as accurate as they can be. So beneath class, then, we have breed. And breed are birds that have a common origin with specific characteristics that distinguish them from other groups, such as the body shape, body size, color of the skin or scales that they might have. Here's an example here. These are English breeds. And they fall because of some similar characteristics that they have that have been determined for their breed. We can then look at specifics on those English types that we might purchase. So these breeds are made or created through, they're created to have consistent appearance and performance. And then they're generated through a foundation mix of bloodline, isolation. That's a geographic kind of isolation where they came from. England's a good example, the English breeds. They're isolated to the British Isles in their origin. And then, of course, they're selected for uniformity. And then environmental practice or environmental factors play a role in the development of those breeds as well. Within these breed standards, there is some head and body characteristics, specific weights, specific shape, color, comb type, plumage, and what we call carriage, or what their posture is of their back and their wings and their tail. These are the three main characteristics that are looked for when it comes to standardizing a breed. And so, color or the type of feather patterns, or the type of comb they might have. You see some examples here of the different comb types that chickens can have, and that all comes into play when we determine a breed. Now, there are some defects which help us to, again, to disqualify birds when it comes to whether or not they are actually a purebred bird. And it can be based on wrong comb type, or if they're too, the adult weight is off, if they have crooked keels, if they have wrong color of shanks, and I'll show you an example of that here in just a minute, if their eye color is incorrect, or some kind of incorrect marking within the color pattern or coloration of the feathers. And so all these different factors can potentially disqualify chickens from being a specific breed or recognized as a specific breed. So classes of heritage chicken, we have there's our American, English, Continental, Mediterranean, Asiatic. Then we have some others that are essentially based on their country of origin. The French example, the Hamburger from Germany, and then some Orientals. But let me show you some pictures of just some of the standard classes with some common breeds that we have. The American breed, the Delaware, the Plymouth Rock, the Wyandotte, New Hampshire and Rhode Island are popular American breeds. And as you can tell by, oftentimes by the name of the bird, name of the breed, you can tell where they were developed here in the United States. So those are 5 very popular breeds of chickens that are in our American class. The English class, we have the Dorking, which is actually probably thought of as the oldest domesticated breed of chicken. Actually it's from Italy originally, and the Romans, when they were on their conquest of Europe, brought the bird into England, the British Isles, and it was then further developed there, and then it's been recognized as an English breed, but it actually is a Mediterranean bird, a Mediterranean origin. The Orpington, the Australorp, is a English breed developed in Australia. It holds the world record on number of eggs laid. Many of these birds will lay in excess of 300 eggs a year, and the world record is 365 by an Australorp, so an egg a day for an entire year. The Sussex down there, and the speckled Sussex is a common variety that people like to have. And the red cap is another one. It's kind of a rare breed, considered kind of on the endangered list a little bit, but also it's another English breed that we have. The Cornish are also English breed. In this case, there's pictures of a partridge Cornish and then a standard. And it's the Cornish cross that is essentially the ancestral bloodline of our modern broiler. And I'll show you a picture of that right now, actually. So if we take a Cornish male and we cross it with a Plymouth female, in both cases we're looking for that white feathering, we get the Cornish cross, which is the bloodline for our and the foundation genetics for a modern broiler. Continental breeds are European breeds. Some of the unique ones, the ones I like, silver lace Polish, the La Fleck, which is from France. It has a V-shaped comb. The Appenzeller Spitzhauben. My ancestry comes from Switzerland, and this Spitzhauben breed of bird, and Appenzeller variety, comes from a little town there called Appenzeller. And so that's a Swiss bird. The Brakel down there at the bottom, what a classic rooster pose that is, but that's a breed from Belgium. And then the Welsummer, a very popular breed because of its dark brown eggs that it lays, is a Dutch breed. Some of our Mediterranean breeds, the Minorca, the Sicilian Buttercup, which actually, by the way, is also an ancient breed, the Leghorn, and the Andalusian, and the white-faced Spanish are some of the Mediterranean breeds that we have. Some of our 3 Asiatic breeds are the Brahma, the Cochin, and the Langshan. And you'll notice that these birds have feathered feet and or shanks. And so if you have chicks that arrive that have some feathering on their feet or shanks, you know that there's some Asiatic breed blood. If it's not purebred, there's some Asiatic bloodline within those chicks that you have because of the feathering on the feet. Some of the unique breeds that are out there, the Old English Game, we kind of talked about them. They're a very old breed, of course, and they're essentially a foundation for some of the more modern cockfighting is really still going on in many places of the world. The Phoenix, a very long feathered Japanese breed. Silky, it's a common and popular Chinese breed. The Araucana, a South American breed that became popular because of the blue-green eggs, blue and green colored eggs that it produces. And this one here up here in the upper right, the Ayam Samani, it's an Indonesian bird, kind of become popular over the last 5 years or so, but it's strikingly very intense melanistic uh, coloration to it, and so everything about that bird is black, feathering, the skin, bones, on into meat and connective tissue. The one thing that's not is it lays white eggs. So if somebody tries to sell you I'm Samani eggs at $40 a piece and they're black, do not buy them because they lay white eggs. A couple other interesting ones, Onagadori, another long tail feathered bird. The Dong Tao, it's a Vietnamese bird breed. And no, it does not have a skin condition there. That is the characteristic of the breed that they have selected for. Evidently, big chicken feet are very popular in Vietnam. Other unique breeds, the Malay, one of the biggest birds we have on the planet, chicken-wise. And then all the way down to the Sarama, which is tiny little, almost teacup-sized chicken. The males have very interesting display characteristics to them, but some unique ones there. And I mentioned some of the historical breeds that we have that throughout history we've seen, really, throughout human history. We talked about the Dorking and Sicilian really were both Roman birds, and the Leghorn Roman birds that were essentially spread around the world through Roman conquest. And then there's the Egyptian bird, the Fayoumi, I think that's how you pronounce it. Really hasn't changed much in centuries. Very similar to the bird of ancient Egypt. We have some other unique, a couple other unique birds I'm going to show you some pictures of. This is a frizzle, and frizzle really isn't a breed. It's not a class or breed or strain. It's a genetic mutation of the way that the feathers lay. Instead of laying flat, they curl backward essentially. And so these are actually modern broiler birds, broiler crosses, or Cornish crosses that have that frizzle gene essentially that is being expressed. But this frizzle gene can show up in any breed. In fact, there are breeders that can essentially select for this type of feather appearance and can then breed for the likelihood of getting a frizzled gene to be expressed. So example here is a buff-laced Polish and then a frizzled buff-laced Polish on the right there. So underneath our breed, then we have variety, and this is these are birds within a breed that have different characteristics that, particularly with regard to plumage, color, pattern, or comb type. An example I'm showing you here is the American class. These are the Wyandotte breed, and so these are varieties of the Wyandotte breed. So we have a golden laced Wyandotte, silver laced, the Colombian Wyandotte, and a partridge feathered Wyandotte. And here's just some other pictures. I decided I would run with the Wyandotte a little bit. So the silver laced Wyandotte was the first Wyandotte that was developed in New York State. Actually, the Wyandotte name, it was named after Indian tribe, Indian nation, the Wyandotte Nation. Really didn't have any connection with them, but it was named in the late 1870s when this breed was developed. That they were given that name. We then have the silver penciled Wyandotte, so you can see the difference in the feather pattern, coloration pattern of those to make the different variety. The golden laced, the buff laced. There's the partridge, the Colombian, which has, interesting now, that has a very distinct feather pattern that we can see in other breeds and actually other classes of birds. So that's the Columbian Wyandotte. The barred Wyandotte, the black laced red Wyandotte, blue Wyandotte, blue laced red Wyandotte. You can see that breeders got carried away almost with some of their efforts for different color patterns. And probably one of the most current or most recent one is the chocolate partridge Wyandotte. What beautiful birds those are. Just have a tremendous sheen to them. And you'll notice the pea comb. This is very characteristic of the Wyandotte breed, is to have that pea comb. We also have some standard black, white, and buff Wyandottes too. But so those are an example of some of the coloration changes that can occur within a breed. Now, I thought it was, when I did some background study on some of this, on why we get different colors of chickens and feathers in general, I found some very interesting things about feather coloration. And really, when it comes down to it, there's really only two types of feather coloring in all of our bird species throughout the world. One is from pigments, either that they produce themselves, either the melanins, particularly blacks and browns. They can pick up some colors from their diet, for example, reds and yellows, and in some cases some green. And so when you see a red bird like a cardinal, what we're seeing is the sunlight was bouncing off of their feathers, and what we're seeing back, I mean, it's a little bit of physics, but what's bouncing back to our eye is the red wavelength. And so we perceive them as being red, but it's influenced in part by the diet they consume. And we know this because if we were to take away some specific components, for example, of a cardinal's diet, we can get that red color to be washed away from its feathers. Other colors are structural, and blue is a perfect example of that. Blue is not a color found in nature per se. Blue is the way we see blue, the way the feather proteins and air pockets are arranged within those feather particles. And so the blue light is bounced back, and that's why we perceive them as blue. Have you ever looked at a bluebird in the shade? Does it look blue? No, it looks black because we're not getting that blue light refracted back into our eye that we would see if they were in the sunlight. Now, some birds that have the really iridescent colors, like hummingbirds and some others, some of the pheasants and things that we have, it's going to be a combination of pigment that's overlaid on these protein layers within their feathers that bounces back all these different colors that we perceive in our eye. This is very fascinating to me, where some of these colorations come from in the breeds and the varieties of chickens that we have. We also have the barring gene. Now, remember I mentioned with the Columbian Wyandotte, a characteristic coloration. The bird on the right is actually an English class. That's the Sussex. And the bird on the left, very similar, isn't it? But it's actually, that is the Delaware. And you can see on the Delaware, the hackle feathers there on its neck, the barring coloration or barring color pattern that is not there with the Sussex or with the Columbian Wyandotte. So that's also another gene mutation, or a gene expression rather, that we can have in some of the feathering of our birds. Okay, that takes us to strain then. And a strain are essentially families or breeding populations within these various varieties that we have, and where we are closing off the breeding. Essentially, we've closed or locked in the breeding within those populations. And the idea is to, of course, we see that in our commercial birds, our commercial layer birds, and our commercial meat birds. The idea then is you want every bird to be as identical as we can. We want them all to be, a 4.5 pound chicken at 42 days of age, or we want them all to produce, 275 eggs a year. And we do that with breeding and selection within closed populations. Well, we also have the sex links, and they're a very popular small flock bird. They're crossbred birds. One of the things that people like that are good is we often can tell the gender of the chick when it's hatched. We don't have to wait until they've starting to mature to tell if they're a male or female. And as hybrids, they're good egg layers, and they as long as you feed them well, take care of them well, they'll produce a lot of eggs, many of them over 300 eggs a year. And some of the common varieties, commercial varieties you can buy, are called the black stars or red stars or golden comets. And these are all sex-linked crossbreds, and we call them sex linked because based on the sex we can tell their coloration. We can tell what sex they are. And so here's some of the examples of some of the crosses that we have. Crossing the Rhode Island Red with the Barred Plymouth Rock, we get the black sex link. And the Golden Comet, for example, down here on the bottom right, is a white Plymouth Rock and a New Hampshire. And so when those chicks hatch, those are the chicks in the middle of the Golden Comet. The males are yellow and the females are russet orange. And you can see on the right, they maintain that coloration through adulthood. And so we can tell, again, from the day they're hatched, what gender they are. Other very popular hybrids that we now have are the blue-green, green eggers, the blue eggers. Some examples here are the olive egger, the cuckoo blue bar, and the green leg bar. Again, these are hybrids, and because of their genetic mix, they produce the green and blue colored eggs. Now, just to have a little bit of fun with you, what if we crossed a naked neck, which is a recognized breed, with the Chinese silky? Now, I will tell you, putting up front with you, you can't cross these two to really get anything when I'm going to show you, but the bloodline is there. Or some of the genetic characteristics of both will appear. So if we, just for talking purposes, cross these two, what do we get? Well, we'll get some chicks that look like this. And yes, these are on my kitchen table. These are some chicks that I hatched out. So some will look like that. Some will look like that. And then a few will look like that. And that is a recessive, a very recessive gene, actually, a featherless, scaleless gene that's being expressed with that particular genetic crossing. Now, I've shown you three. There's a fourth that comes out of that mix, and the fourth is don't survive the egg. It's a fatal cross, and so those chicks don't survive to even live their first day. They die because of the genetic cross, they die within the egg in development. We do have the scaleless. Years ago, there was an Israeli company that wanted to, thought that maybe they could produce and grow these scaleless birds, or to produce them in genetic cross, that they would do well in hot to Middle Eastern climate. Problem is, chicken skin is very thin, and they're a little prone to sunburn, and so they get scratched and sunburned very easily. And so a venture like that didn't work out well. But these birds can be seen on occasion and propagated with specific crosses. But really, it comes down to genetics. That's really all it is. A Chihuahua is a dog, but so is a Great Dane. We call them dogs. Well, it's the same with our chickens, really. Over the years, we've been able to genetically select birds for either breast meat quality or quantity or whatever attributes we're looking for, increased egg production or fewer blood spots within eggs, and something else that we can genetically select against. And so it's all about genetics. Pumping birds or dogs with hormones, that doesn't occur. That's not how we get a Great Dane, by pumping a Chihuahua full of hormones. Well, it's the same way with chickens. We don't get a big modern broiler by pumping them with hormones. It's through that genetic selection over the years that we've been able to attain the meat quality and quantity that we're looking for. So when it comes to selecting the right chicken for a small flock, what do we want to look for? What do we need to know really as we're going into it? What do we want them for? Eggs, meat, we just want them for pleasure. We just like them. We just want them as pets. We want to show them. Heavier birds do better in colder climates. The geography comes into play. Sometimes those big, heavy feathered breeds don't do as well in Georgia heat as some of the others. How much space do we have? Some of the more active breeds don't really do well in tight confinement, like in an urban setting. A good example would be some of the Mediterranean breeds. The leghorn can be really kind of hyperactive bird, and they sometimes don't do as well in tight confinement. So you want to look for maybe the temperament and or some of the calmer birds might be better. Are we looking for some meat quality? You want to grow some birds for meat. Are you looking for egg size or productivity or just the color, a color spectrum? What are your interests? And we mentioned about this last week. For some of you who were there, do you want it just for your family needs, or you are looking for something else you want to do with it? But before you start anything, really, you need to investigate if there are any ordinances or restrictions or covenants that might be in your neighborhood or your where you live, to see if it prohibits or restricts how you might be able to keep your poultry. A little bit about egg color. Egg color is white is the wild type. Brown eggs really are just white eggs with brown pigment on them. And one of the last stages of egg formation, those brown egg laying hens will put a brown pigment on top of the egg. So you can actually sand the brown color off. It's on top of the calcium. Some of those blue-green eggs actually have some pigment that come from the bile, from the gallbladder, and those kind of blue-green pigments get deposited throughout the shell as it's formed. So that's kind of the difference between those shell colors. And we mentioned again last week, and I'll tell you again. There's when it comes to coloration of the eggs, there's no difference nutritionally. The eggs are the same. Same weight classes of egg have the same nutritional value. And really the main difference is that those brown eggs come from bigger hens, and the shells are a little bit thicker, but because they're bigger hens and they lay a little bit fewer eggs, it costs more feed to produce those eggs. And so generally it's the price difference between the egg that's really the main difference. Well, there are a lot of places, actually, tools that you can use to help you select chickens based on what you're looking for. Cackle Hatchery has a chicken breed list comparison chart. Backyard Chickens magazine has a great one as well. Tells you which birds do best in the type of climate, what color of eggs, if they're what kind of temperament they might have. And so there's some tools out there that you can use to help you select the breed or variety of bird that you're looking for. Well, when it comes down to it, and this is based on several I guess, comparison charts that I've kind of looked at. If I were looking for the best group of backyard birds based on temperament, temperature tolerance, egg production, and meat utility, I would select from these breeds and varieties: Rhode Islands, the Wyandottes, the New Hampshires, Sussex, Orpington, Australorp, and then the sex links. So if you look at that, list there, you'll notice that they are either American or English breeds, and they're all brown egg layers. And those birds tend to be the most calm and do the best, I think, in a small flock scenario. Yes, you can get. There's nothing that says you can't get some Leghorns or some of those funny Polish or some of those other varieties that are out there. I'm just saying, if you're looking for kind of the best all-round scoring breeds of birds for small flocks, I think these are the lists that you want to consider. This hatchery, it's actually called My Pet Chicken. They have a great little tool, Pick a Chicken Breed Selector tool. And so you can go to this web page and it'll help you select, maybe make some decisions on the type of breed you're looking for based on, again, on geography, where you live, if you're looking for a rare bird, or if you want to rear the chicks, or if you want to buy, you can see down the list here the different things that they help you select from. And so that's a good tool to use to help you select the type of breed that you're looking for as well. Now, I get the questions about how do you determine the sex of the chick, and again, it can be difficult. A lot of us might play the lottery, hoping to win. Yeah, your chances of winning the lottery about 302 million to 1. Your chances of detecting a rooster or hen are about 2 to 1. You're either going to be 50% right or 50% wrong. So, it's not difficult, but sometimes you might have to wait to make a determination. We talked about the sex link crosses that we can help us tell the difference between a male and a female at hatch, which is good. The black sex link at the bottom. The males have a little white spot on them. The females don't. So again, you can tell right off the day of hatch what they are, and then the golden comets there. So that's one way, of course. There are some crosses that have what we call a hybrid autosexing, which means that we can sex the chicks based on their color generation after generation. They're not a recognized breed, they're a crossbreed, but they're a crossbreed that breeds true. Unlike these sex links, they do not breed true. You can't take 2 sex links and then produce the same color, male female color scenario generation after generation, but you can with these autosex birds. Example here are these. The chick on the left is a female, and the chick on the right is the male. And that's the, gosh, all of a sudden I forgot the name of that variety. It's a German variety. There is some people who are professionals, really, can do what we call vent sexing, where they can evert the vent of the chicken and be able to tell the difference. It's very difficult to do with standard poultry. Chickens don't have that little rudimentary organ, as you can see down there, that the rhea has, so we can't just determine it that easily. And so even professionals that will do vent sexing, they only have about a 90% accuracy. So it's still difficult to do, and you can harm the chick if you're not careful. So I would, and I can't do it either. I leave vent sexing to the professionals that can do it. In some cases, you can determine the sex of the chick based on the feather growth. It only works if you have a fast feathering male cross with a slow feathering female. And what you get is you will get, if I can get my pointer to work here, you will get a difference between primaries and secondaries on the wings. So you can see here, the primaries are longer than the secondary feathers on the wings. So that's a female. If they're straight across, as you can see here, that would be a male. But this, you can only tell this again on specific breeds or specific sex-linked traits. And you can only tell for about 3 days. And then after that, you can't tell anymore. So it has to be something that's done right as they hatch in order to make that determination. For most of us, we need to wait until we see secondary sex traits or gender traits. And the example here is of a Sussex, and you can see the male is starting to get a little bit more development of the comb and the wattles, more red coloration. So the male and the female, you can start seeing those secondary sex characteristics anywhere between really 7 to 8 weeks of age, depending on the breed or variety that you might have. So for those of us that have to, where you can't have males within a location or an urban environment, that's something you want to, unless you buy pre-sexed chicks and you just buy it straight run, knowing that probably 50% are going to be males, you need to watch for those secondary sex characteristics so that you can eliminate them from the flock if it's something that you have to do because of where you live. There are some kind of old wives' tales about sexing chicks, and I call them unstable methodologies. One of them is incubation temperature. There's a wives' tale that says if you incubate a little hot, you'll have males, and if you incubate a little cold, you'll get females. Well, we know we can do that with alligators or reptiles, but it's not scientifically proven with chickens. Now we might say, well, maybe if they're the modern link between modern relative of a T-Rex, and maybe they have some reptilian characteristics to them, but we can't separate the sexes based on incubation temperature. Egg shape doesn't work either. Round eggs aren't consistently going to be females, and oblong shaped eggs are not going to be males. And some would say, well, it's how you handle them too. They're going to respond differently. And the pictures are showing here that males, if you pick them up by the scruff of the neck, they don't fight you where the females do. And there's all kinds of different scenarios that people have thought they've come up with over the years, but just holding a chicken or a chick is not going to tell you whether it's a male or female. Now, I told you I'd show you a picture of a bird that has a defect. If you look at this picture, this broiler bird, you can see those green shanks. That is something that the commercial industry would certainly not want in their genetic makeup of their the strains of birds that they have. And so that's an example of a genetic defect that's made its way into that particular flock of birds. Well, there are a lot of places you can find chicks and different varieties, lots of mail order hatcheries that are good. I've mentioned several already. Stromberg's, Murray McMurray, very old, popular hatcheries that you can order birds and equipment and different things from. My one thing I would have you do is always make sure that wherever you buy your birds, whatever hatchery you buy them from, whatever eggs or wherever you get your eggs from, that hatchery is participating in the National Poultry Improvement Program. That's what MPIP stands for. And if they're a reputable hatchery and have any history to them, they're going to be participating to make sure that our poultry bloodlines are clean of typhoid, pylori, avian influenza, even salmonella. are being monitored. So I would caution you to make sure that wherever you get your birds from, that they're participating in that program. Now, I know a lot of people go to flea markets and farmers markets, things like that, and buy birds. And you can buy some nice birds, but you have to be careful. You never know what that bird has been exposed to, or what the history is. And so just make sure, be very careful whenever you add birds to an existing flock that you separate them first to make sure that haven't been exposed to something that they are not exhibiting symptoms of yet. Doesn't mean they're going to be clean of everything, uh, uh, but do that to make sure that your birds, you keep your flocks as healthy as you can. And I think that's the last slide I have. Any questions now? I'll stop sharing my screen and let's see what questions we have.
Thank you, Dr. Ritz. That was very interesting. I liked that one a lot. You've answered a couple of the questions that came up in the chat as we were going along, particularly about docile and aggressive breeds or more calmer breeds. And you had that list that was kind of, the top 10 good breeds for backyard, for newbies and for small flocks. So I think that kind of covered it there. Can you speak to places like Tractor Supply? So a couple of people have brought this up, and I'm curious about it as well. Are they part of the NPIP? Are the chicks vaccinated, or is that really not a good place to purchase birds?
I would say Tractor Supply. I don't know for sure. It's probably something I should look into. I would say they're probably getting their chicks from a commercial hatchery, which would be part of the NPIP program. So I would say that they'd be fine. The issue with vaccination, though, is not all hatcheries automatically vaccinate for everything. And oftentimes you have to pay extra to get certain vaccines or vaccinations. And but the most important one for small flocks is Merrick's disease. So no matter where you buy your birds from, it'd be great if they were vaccinated with Merrick's disease, for Merrick's disease. Because the likelihood that they will come down with that disease eventually in your flock is very high. So that's one thing where if you buy birds from an online hatchery, they often will give you the option of vaccinating or not vaccinating because you're going to pay a little bit more. Always vaccinate.
I would agree. I was just curious about that because you always see them there, and I didn't know if much about that. Is Georgia too hot for the Jersey Giants? Says they're not heat tolerant.
Well, the Jersey Giant is it's one of the biggest chickens we have here in North America. It's the largest American breed, and it doesn't mean we can't have them here. It's just that just bear in mind, that they because of their body size and the feathering that they have, they might be more prone to heat stress. And so during the hot part of the summer, you need to make sure they have access to plenty of shade and clean, cool water to help them get through those hot periods.
I've got one that says that her Rhode Island Reds are obsessed with scratching and digging. Is there something she can do to keep them busy that leaves the floor of the run intact?
No.
No? They just do that? Okay.
You can, there are chicken toys out there. You can create chicken toys, hanging, hanging a cantaloupe or a pumpkin from a string, or, there are different things you can throw in there for them to pick around, but that's what they do. They're scavengers by their instinct. They're a scavenger, really. And so they're going to peck and scratch and do all that no matter what you do.
Can you speak to the viability of raising quail instead of chickens, particularly in small residential areas or small families?
Yes, quail are a good, I think would be a good alternative. I've raised quail at our research farm several times, and they do pretty well, really. They It's a little harder to um, there's not a lot of commercial feeds that are available for quail that match it quite right. You can buy some game bird feed that works. Quail are quiet for the most part, but both males and females will make a fair amount of noise. It's not loud like a rooster, but they'll make a fair amount of noise when they approach breeding age, which is really pretty quickly. Within about 42 days of age, they start breeding. But they're a good option, and they're smaller, and most hatcheries also have quail as an option. So, yeah,
They make a very tiny egg.
they do.
They do.
They're great for pickled eggs. I've pickled a lot of quail eggs, and it's one little bite, and you got a little pickled egg, and so I like them for that.
What about that? It's interesting. I got some questions about, let's see here. What is a good rooster to hen ratio for a small flock? I'm going to say 0 to however many hens you want. I get a lot of people sending me questions about roosters as a problem. So do not encourage people to have them unless they're.
Yeah, you don't need them to get eggs for sure. Those hens are going to lay eggs, no matter if there's a rooster around or not. A lot of urban areas, roosters aren't allowed, and so because of a noise factor, and so that's something that's generally first on the list when it comes to a local ordinance about poultry. But yeah, you don't need a rooster, but a good ratio would be 10-1. If you're looking for get some fertile eggs, 10-1's fine. Anything more than 10, you need to start considering a second rooster.
Tanya says that she now has a chick that tested positive for Americ, but can she add a vaccinated chick to her current flock? I would say, well, maybe you go ahead.
Yeah, a chick vaccinated for Americ's should be. I mean, it won't be shedding virus, so it should be fine to enter into a new flock. If the existing flock has not been vaccinated, I mean the new chick wouldn't pose a problem, but I would certainly consider vaccinating any new birds that enter that flock.
Janet's got a chicken that wants to keep brooding. She sits on a wooden egg for about 28 days, and then she gets up, walks around. Is this okay, or is there anything she should do for her to prevent her from doing that?
Sometimes it's hard to break hens that go broody, there are a couple of things that could be involved there. She might be an internal layer, which means that if she's not laying eggs, she might be laying eggs, but she's just laying them into her body, and then that's still triggering the hormonal patterns. To break broody, though, you need to take that wooden egg away. You don't want her to have anything that she can think that she's going to hatch. And so you got to take away anything like that. You got to make sure there aren't any dark corners in the coop. Maybe even pull her out of the flock and put her in a small pen with 24-hour light, that kind of thing, and that helps to break that hormonal cycle that she's might be stuck in. That doesn't mean it'll happen, but those are ways that you can break that broody cycle and get her to start laying eggs again if that's the problem.
You got any tips for sexing the silkies? She said it's difficult until they either crow or lay an egg.
Yeah, they're hard, aren't they? I don't have any good tips for you. That's one of those breeds that you have to wait for those secondary characteristics to come along, and so watch for aggression a little bit. The males are going to be a little more aggressive, a little more active early on, and look for birds that are, as they start to challenge each other for dominance. That'll let you know right away that those are probably two little males, and so you can pull them out then if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, you're almost going to have to wait for some of those characters to develop.
This person says that one of their chickens is being pecked at by the others. Why and what to do?
Yeah, they it's the old pecking order. It's just part of their genetics. And there's going to be a dominant bird, a dominant hen, and she's going to kind of set the tone. Sometimes the dominant hen is so dominant you have to take her out. But if you have a bird that is at the bottom of the totem pole and it's getting excessively beat up, you can take the bird away and put it into isolation, let it heal up, that kind of thing, before you try and reintroduce it again. But know that once you put the bird back in again, that process of establishing that pecking order is still going to be part of that flock. And if the male, or if a hen that's become a little bit more mature and start to assert herself a little bit more, she might be able to make her way up that pecking order. But if it's getting damaged too much, certainly need to pull her out and get her healed up before putting her back in.
Emily wants to know how are the eggs vaccinated before hatch, and is that at all possible in a non-commercial setting? And I'm assuming that they're vaccinated right after they hatch, not when they're in the egg.
Yeah, well, commercially, some vaccines, and I'm not a vaccine expert, but some vaccines we can administer in the egg as the chicks are developing. Some of those vaccines that we're looking for, like particularly for our commercial egg industry, they get vaccinated in the egg. But then also they get vaccinated as they hatch, the day they hatch. And the Merrick's is a good example of that. That Merrick's vaccine and the Newcastle disease vaccine can be given at day of hatch, and often is. You can buy vaccines. There are some vaccines, Merrick's and Fowlpox are available for purchase for small flocks, but just know that those vaccine companies, they make vaccine for large commercial industry. And so the dosage that you'll be able to buy, the minimum dose will probably be 1,000. It won't be expensive. It'll be like $20 or so, but you still have a vial of 1,000 doses of vaccine that you're only going to use for a couple birds. But that's just the nature of it.
Okay, got 3 more questions here. 3-week-old chicks and a separate group of 2-day-old chicks. How soon should they be acclimated to each other?
Oh, that's a good question. I would 3-week-old chicks are going to start, depending on the breed, they're going to start they're going to start showing some male female characteristics soon. And so you're going to have some aggressive aggressive little males that are going to start developing. So I would probably wait a couple weeks for those young chicks to get a couple weeks under their belt before you put them together.
Erica has inherited 8 chickens with their house and they don't know their history. Is it a good idea to vaccinate them, or will it be dangerous to them if they've been vaccinated before?
Well, it wouldn't be dangerous if they've been already been vaccinated for something. It would be a vaccine would be just like a booster, if anything else, kind of like the coronavirus, or COVID rather. It takes an initial shot and then a booster to get that immunity. So it wouldn't be an issue from that standpoint. Depending on how old those birds are, would depend on whether or not you want to pursue vaccination. But they can be vaccinated for fowlpox anytime. Merrick's is much more of a day of age kind of thing to get that immunity into their system. But yeah, that's a difficult call, really. I mean, if they're healthy chickens, I would probably just let them go and just. But if you reintroduce more, then that's when you're going to have to pay some attention, because if you don't know their history, you could potentially bring in a bird that looks well but is shedding virus that those birds haven't been exposed to, and then they would become sick with whatever those birds had survived that they brought in. So.
All right, and our final one, is it recommended to eat a hen whenever she quits laying? RIP.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's always an option. Stewing hens, that's where the term stewing hen comes from. A hen that's less than productive when it comes to egg productivity. So there's nothing wrong with eating an old hen. I would pressure cook them or something like that. But some people don't want to do that. But they can, you can always keep them as a pet, even just knowing that you're going to spend money on them and not get any eggs out of them. But if it were me, I would eat it and get some birds that lay eggs.
All right, well, that's the end of our questions for the evening. Everybody that's still on here, please take a moment to fill out the survey that I've got for you guys, especially if you're trying to complete all 4 of the classes. And thank you, Vanessa, for my plants comment there. If you guys are interested, feel free to join in on the next week's. We have 2 more sessions left in February, so I'd like to see you guys come back. And that's all I've got. So thank you all. And thank you, Dr. Ritz.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye.